So good morning to some of you, good evening to others. I think we'll probably get started right about now. The session is being recorded and a recording will be shared with anyone who signed up. We will also share the slides afterwards, so don't panic too much if you miss anything. We have a metadata health check session for you today that should take about 45 minutes. During that time, we'll talk about the importance of metadata. Although if you've joined today, hopefully that means you already think metadata is important, which is great. We'll demonstrate our participation reports tool for you today. We'll show you a few examples of this in action, and we will encourage you to look at your own participation report if you're a Crossref member. We'll also have a look at our new helper tool for journal content registration, which was launched last year and which can help you improve the scores in your participation report. And then at the end, we'll have plenty of time for questions, anything that comes up about participation reports, your own metadata, content registration. Feel free to ask it in the Q&A and we will get to it whenever it makes sense. So speaking of Q&A, many of you will be familiar with Zoom already. You should find a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If you use that for any questions you have, you can ensure that we see it. In the chat, sometimes messages can get lost because there is too much weather chat that needs to be had. Yeah, so here today from Crossref are at least these three people, if not more, hiding in the audience. My name is Lena. I'm part of our programs and services team, and I am joined today by Kathleen from our tech support team and also Patrick, who is a senior front-end developer. Hi, both. They'll help me answer questions. They'll keep an eye on the Q&A and wave nicely at all of you, just to make sure that we don't miss anything. And if the rain floods the telephone lines in Berlin and I suddenly go offline, they will try and rescue the session, but I'm sure it'll be fine. I will be your main presenter for today. Great to see so many of you here today. So with that out of the way, I think we can jump right in and start with the basics. What do we mean when we say participation? So as a Crossref member, you can participate by registering unique DOIs for each item that you publish. And you can also provide a rich metadata record alongside the DOI. You should be displaying the DOI for each item on a unique landing page for that item. And you should also keep the associated metadata record up to date, which means that you can add more richness over time, or you can simply update the metadata to reflect reality if anything changes. And what metadata are we talking about here? There are many different types of metadata that you can register with Crossref. There is the kind of basic bibliographic metadata, which is things like the titles of articles or books or whatever content you're publishing, the publication dates, contributor names, abstracts, all the kinds of things that I think are quite familiar to most people who are in the publishing arena. But there are also many other fields in our metadata input schema that allow you to register things like full text URLs for various applications, for example, for text mining for researchers, or for our similarity check service. Even if you don't put the full text of the content online for free for everyone to see, you can still give specific applications access to the full text. We also have a service named Crossmark, which allows you to record post-publication updates, corrections, retractions, those sorts of things for your content. And in order to participate in Crossmark, you have to link your metadata records to an update policy where you state how you go about registering updates for your content. We will get to this in a bit more detail later. You can also register some metadata about relationships between works, such as translations or citations, of course. Also provenance data, which means where the work came from, who published it, who funded it, those sorts of things. You can uniquely identify funders by registering RAW IDs or funder registry IDs. There's also award numbers and grant DOIs for funding metadata. And then finally, what's also really important for researchers increasingly is that their contributor and affiliation metadata is correctly present in the metadata. So things like ORCID IDs, we encourage our members to collect those from their authors and then register them with us, as well as affiliation metadata, for which we favor RAW IDs. RAW is the Research Organization Registry. If you've never heard of it before, we recommend you look into it. They provide unique persistent identifiers for research producing organizations. So that's kind of the crash course in metadata. You have some idea now of the kinds of metadata that make up a rich metadata record. And all of this together helps our community to build what we like to call the research nexus, which is a rich and reusable open network of relationships that connect research organizations, people, things, and actions. We make the metadata that you register with us openly available because we want the research nexus to be a scholarly record that the global community can build on forever for the benefit of society. Thank you, Patrick. There's some more information on our website. So why is all this important? Well, the metadata that you deposit with Crossref is used downstream by lots of different organizations and researchers through our open APIs. The primary users of the metadata that gets deposited with us by members are actually our members themselves. So your own organization may well be making use of our APIs to see the metadata in our databases for various applications. You can see some of these listed here, for example. There are lots of tools that support content discovery or bibliographic management or metrics and reporting systems and so on that rely on Crossref metadata. So when you register rich metadata with us, you're doing a service to the wider scholarly community, but also to yourself because you're putting your content in a good position to be discovered and to be used by the rest of the world. And I think most people understand this in principle, especially if you're here today. But it's a different thing still to see a kind of visual representation of your participation in Crossref and how you're contributing to the research nexus. And yes, we will share the slides in an email when the recording of this is available. You'll get the slides. So you don't need to take notes too furiously. So yeah, we developed some years ago the participation reports tool to be a visual representation of how each Crossref member participates in the research nexus. It would be great if my little helpers could share the link to the tool in the chat now, because I think we should just jump right in. I would encourage everyone here to go to the participation reports tool. Thanks, Patrick. And to find your Crossref member organization by typing its name into the field in the center of the screen. I will also do this myself now. Stop sharing my screen for a second and go to the tool itself so we can all do it at the same time. And I can show you an example, but you can follow along doing the same thing for your own organization. So this is what you should be seeing if you go to that link. If you're not finding your organization, it could be that it is registered with Crossref under a different name. So if you usually refer to your organization as a journal, but it actually has a parent university or institution or publisher that owns that journal, then you might need to look for that. Just let us know if you're having trouble finding a member you're looking for, and we might be able to help you find it. I will go here to one that I've accessed before, just to show you an example of what a participation report looks like. So this is an institutional member, I believe from Hungary. And as you can see, once I select that member, I get taken to a new page where I can see the proportion of this member's content that contains one of these 11 key fields in its metadata. So this page will look slightly different for each of you if you're looking at your own report, because your statistics are going to be different. Maybe you're doing better on Crossmark, but worse on abstracts. The numbers won't be the same. That's the whole point of the tool. But the general structure of the page will be the same for everyone. It's quite simple. So you will see near the top here, first the member name, then the total number of registered content items, and also a breakdown into the various different types of content that this member has registered. Most types of content that you can register with Crossref are represented here. So you can see some of the most common ones here: preprints, journal articles, conference papers, books, and book chapters. Yeah, maybe Kathleen and Patrick can help those of you who are struggling to find the organization. Just let us know in the chat what you would expect to find, and then we will try and help you track down your organization. In the meantime here, by default, if your organization has registered any journal content, then you will see the statistics for journal articles to begin with, because that's just one of the most common things that members are interested in. But you can change here near the top left in this drop down what type of content you want to look at. So this member, for example, also has some books registered, and you see the statistics are quite different if I change back and forth between the content types. Because books don't have all the same metadata fields as journal articles in our schema, you see fewer fields represented here. So there's no funding metadata for books, for example. So yeah, so you can make your way through all of the different content types this way. And I'll go back to journal articles for now, just because it represents everything. But then there is another drop down here on the right-hand side where you can see that by default, I get shown the statistics for current content, which means anything that was published in this calendar year or the 2 previous years. So anything from 2023 to 2025 is included in these statistics. If I go to backfile, then I will see the statistics for content by this member that is older than 2023. And this is separated just because a lot of time it's harder for members to provide. So for example, it's hard to provide ORCID IDs for content that was published in 1965 because ORCID didn't exist yet then. So it is broken down by time, but you can also look over all time to see the statistics for all of the content of a specific type that was registered for a member. And then lastly, if you're looking at journal articles, you see a field here that says search by title, where you can search for a specific journal title and see the statistics just for that title. For example, here's 3 journals from the University of Szeged. And I can see if I select one of them that the statistics for this specific journal are different again from what we see across the whole member. If you're not finding your journal here, that might be because you don't have an ISSN or you don't have the ISSN registered with Crossref. For technical reasons, we can only include journals here that have ISSNs in the Crossref metadata. So you can see this is a journal that does very well on similarity check URLs and abstracts. And what each of these fields mean, we will get to next. But let me just stop sharing this for a second and see if most people have had their answers about where to find their content. All right, well, we can follow up with each of you. We have your names if we are not able to answer someone's questions in the meantime, but you will get an idea of how to use the tool for when you do find your member after this. So that was the basic functionality. Let's have a look now at the individual fields. Actually, maybe we should still do this in the tool itself. Why not? I'll go back to sharing. So first, and probably most crucial is references. The idea of reference linking is kind of where Crossref started in the first place. So if you recall the image that I showed earlier of the research nexus, obviously citations between works are one of the very fundamental ways that two pieces of research can be linked with each other. So including reference metadata is really important. Including abstracts and open metadata is a great way to improve the discoverability of research. A lot of downstream services rely on abstract metadata to serve up relevant content to their users. And there's a lot more information in abstracts than there would be in just the title, for example. We've already mentioned ORCID IDs before. Crossref also has an auto-update integration with ORCID, which means that if you include an author's ORCID ID in the metadata of a work, we can send a notification to that author via ORCID and ask them for permission to automatically keep their ORCID record updated. And then we can add that work and any future works with the ORCID ID to the author's record and keep the metadata up to date so that they don't have to do that manually, which is quite popular with millions of researchers. A relatively recent addition to participation reports are affiliation and specifically raw ID metadata for identifying where the contributors work and where they are affiliated. We added this last year. These are kind of the top basic metadata that are the first things that we look at when we look at participation from a member. There's more here, but I will leave it at this in the interest of time for now. We will get back to these fields in a second when we talk about how to register this metadata going forward. We find that for a lot of members, the affiliation and raw IDs and also funder IDs are missing fields, but do have a look at where your gaps are, and then we can look at how you might be able to collect and send this data going forward. And if you're surprised by seeing gaps where you think you shouldn't be having gaps, I think I already saw a couple of these messages in the chat. You think, hold on, I thought I was registering abstracts. We can have a look at if maybe something is going wrong in your content registration, and so that data isn't making it to us, and that's why it's not here. So that participation reports can be a really great way to find problems with your workflows, because you might think you're registering things, but you actually aren't. Backfile, yes, okay. Anything that is older than the current calendar year plus or minus 2. So right now it's the year 2025. Anything that was published that has a publication date in the metadata before 2023 is considered backfile content, whereas anything newer than that is considered current. So you'll often see differences in the coverage scores between the current and the backfile content, just because ideally you get better over time at registering metadata, and so the current content will usually have better scores than the backfile content. But you can also look, if you change the toggle at the top right to all time, you can see statistics for everything that your organization has registered. Yes, and there is also more information about all of this in the documentation about participation reports. But I want to take a few minutes now to talk about improving your score. Obviously, how exactly you can do that depends on how you register your metadata records. And there's a number of ways of doing that. We have a lot of members who use manuscript tracking systems that have existing Crossref integrations or plugins, such as OJS, Open Journal Systems. In that case, the member typically has to only set everything up in the system, put in their Crossref credentials, select what they want to send, and then they can automatically deposit metadata via their system in XML format, which is great. Some members like to create their own XML files and upload these, or otherwise send them to our systems, which is all fine. But there are also lots of people who are not that comfortable working with XML, and these people can rely on our manual, what we call helper tools, which let you enter data in a kind of more human-friendly format. And then in the background, these tools convert that data into XML before registering it with our system. That's what we're talking about today. Some of you will be familiar with our trusty old web deposit form, which accepts metadata for a range of different content types. And if you use the web deposit form and you have questions about that, feel free to ask those today, but we're focusing today on our newest helper tool, which we call our record registration form, which is a lot more modern than the web deposit form. And we launched this initially 2 years ago, a little bit more than 2 years ago, for members to register grant records without having to touch XML. And then as of last year, it also supports journal content. So I'd love to tell you a little bit more about registering journal articles with rich metadata with this new tool. So I think we just jumped ahead a bit much. Okay, better. Yeah, so in general, if you want to improve your score for an element in your participation report, of course, the easiest thing going forward is just to add that element to your future registrations. You can also re-register both in our new helper tool and in the web deposit form, each record one by one, and just add more metadata than you did when you initially registered it. This new tool also allows you to download your record after submitting it, which saves a copy of the file in JSON format to your computer with all the metadata you've entered into it, and you can load it back in at a later date to pre-fill all of the information, and then you can make changes to it easily. It sounds easy. Yeah, we're working on making this even easier without having to download a file. Yeah, one way to improve your score is to go back to previous records, and another way is to make all your future records better. You can find the new tool that we're talking about today at this link, which I'm sure will be in the chat very soon. It can be used, like I said earlier, to register journal articles or grants. You should note, though, no matter which method you use to send metadata to Crossref, it can take some hours, up to 24 hours in some cases, for those changes to make their way through all of our systems and make a difference in your participation report. So you can't update a record and then live check how it improves your participation report score. You need to have a little bit of patience with that, but it's worth the investment. If you want to retroactively update a lot of records rather than one by one, there are some elements that you can upload in bulk using our web deposit form. So that's the older tool that we've had for many years and that many of you will know. They're listed here, things like funding data or similarity check URLs. And then just one point on the new tool, if you want to use it, you need to, much like in participation reports, have an ISSN for your journal, or we won't be able to register your journal metadata right now. The web deposit form allows you to use journal DOIs instead of ISSNs, so that's always an option for anyone who doesn't have ISSNs for their journal, but we're working on unifying this. So, yes, if somebody could add the link to the form, sorry, this URL in the chat, that would be great. Or you could just about type it in from here, but we'll be sharing it now. If you want to try it out, maybe do it at the end of the call. We'll give you some time to do that, but all you have to do is go to this link and sign in using your usual Crossref account credentials that you would use in our admin tool or anywhere else. It looks like this. I can put the link in the chat. Oh, here it is. Okay, thanks. Yeah, it has some key advantages over the web deposit form that I've mentioned a couple of times now. It's a more modern tool that has a better user experience in general, but also it lets you submit references for your journal articles. It lets you submit that important affiliation metadata, including uniquely identifying raw IDs for your author affiliations. It has a lot of kind of quality of life features that checks before you submit something whether the data is valid and in the expected format, so you don't have a failure at the end of the process, but rather the form already tells you this doesn't look like an ORCID ID. Are you sure it's formatted correctly? That sort of thing, which the web deposit form doesn't do very much of. So if you go to this page and you log in, you can select new record, and then there are 2 content types to choose from, a grant or a journal article. We'll focus on journals today. If you select journal article, you get taken to a form with 3 basic steps, as you can see here near the top of the screen. It asks you first to enter the metadata of your journal article, and then the journal that the article is in, and then if you want, also the journal issue or volume, if you'd like to include that in the metadata. And then you can check again that everything looks good, and you can submit. It's a web form like many others you probably use every day. And if you scroll through that first article page, you'll recognize a lot of the elements that we've already spoken about in the context of participation reports, which brings us back to the topic of participation and metadata quality. So if we go through the fields one by one, references, as we've said before, are really key to building the research nexus, and you can include in this new tool your reference metadata in a built-in field without having to go to a separate tool to register your references. If you've used OJS or our simple text query tool before to deposit references, you'll be familiar with how this works. You copy and paste the reference list into a field. You have to make sure that each reference starts on a new line so that the system knows what to interpret as a new reference. And then our system, once you've submitted, tries to match each of those references to an existing DOI so that those all-important links in the research nexus can be made. If you want to add abstracts to an article, you can simply type or copy and paste the abstract into another field in the form. You can also select the language that the abstract is written in. By default, this is set to English because the majority of the content registered with us is in English, but the tool supports lots and lots of different languages. And you can even register multiple abstracts for one article in different languages by clicking Add New. And then if we look at the elements that relate to authors, ORCID IDs, affiliation metadata, RAW IDs, these are all included in the new tool as well. The web deposit form only accepts ORCID IDs, but it doesn't have any affiliation metadata. In this new tool, what it looks like is you can start typing their affiliation, and then you can select a match from the raw database. This is what that looks like. So we look up in real time what different options the research organization registry has for your input, and you can select the correct match, and then you will have clearly identified the affiliation for this author. For funding data, you have deposit for this built into the tool as well. I should update these screenshots here, and I realize because we've recently made a change here where you can also use raw IDs to identify funders. You can have multiple pieces of funding in one article. You just have to click Add New, and then you will get another set of these fields where you can enter who has funded this work. Can I identify them uniquely, and what is the award number of the grant or award that was granted for this work. Yeah, coming soon. I missed this bit. We last did this webinar in March, and we've updated this since. So I will update those slides before they're shared with you, so you can see what it looks like now with raw IDs for funding metadata. Apologies. So I mentioned Crossmark earlier. If you want to improve the Crossmark enabled score, what you need to do is to register the DOI of the journals or the publisher's Crossmark policy page. So that's a page where you explain what your post-publication update policy is, you assign a DOI to that, and then you include that DOI in the metadata of other articles going forward. There is a field in this new tool for that as well, on the journal page where you include your journal metadata. If you want to add more detailed Crossmark metadata, such as actually registering a retraction for a journal article, for example, you can do this using the web deposit form. This is what that looks like. We don't need to look at every little field here in so much detail, but our helper tools can kind of be mixed and matched in that way, in that they all connect to the same central system. And if you've originally registered a record using the web deposit form, for example, you can re-enter all of that data in the new tool and make changes and additions to it to make it richer. And that works fine. Or vice versa. And then there are these tools for other purposes, license URLs. So if there's a Creative Commons license, for example, that applies to the article, you can include that URL in the metadata. Similarity check URLs are needed if you want to participate in the similarity check service for plagiarism checking by Crossref. It's just a couple of simple text fields where you can put these URLs in. And text mining URLs is the one gap that we still have in the new tool. You can't register text mining URLs currently with this method. Again, there's a workaround in place in that you can use the web deposit form to add these even in bulk to a lot of different records at once if you want to include text mining metadata. So I see there were some questions. Yeah, it's so the participation reports tool is a few years old, and I think we've updated some of our input schema since then. And there are a few fields that maybe it wasn't possible to register yet when we first built it, and now they are. We are currently looking into refreshing and updating the interface of the tool a bit and modernizing it, and yeah, we will make sure as part of that that all of the mapping of which data is possible to submit and what is displayed can actually be seen in the participation report. Here is the link from the slide. So that was all of the fields that are listed in participation reports and how they translate to the new tool. Again, if you'd like to try it out by yourself, you can go to this link that you can scroll up in the chat to find. Sign in with your regular account, follow the steps. You will see that it says in the interface that the tool is in beta, which just means that it's fully functional. You can use it, but we're still actively developing it. We're adding more features to it to make sure that it meets our members' needs. Right now, for example, we're working on allowing you to go back to a previously registered article or grant and edit its metadata without having to type it all in again. But it's been a while since we first released it, and if you want to try it out and share some feedback, you can do so. There is a thread on our Crossref community forum specifically dedicated to feedback on the tool that's quite active. Where anything that stands out to you that you'd like to see improved, you can highlight there and also follow for more updates. And other places in general to get help if you're stuck with any of our tools or services. You can read our very detailed documentation. You can go to our community forum. You can contact Kathleen and her colleagues in our support team by going to this page. And I think with all of that, this is a good time for me to be quiet for a minute so we can have a look at all of the questions that we've had so far, because this is the end of the slides that we wanted to get through. Thanks so much, Patrick and Kathleen, for answering so many of those questions already. let's have a look at what we see in the Q&A. Thomas asks, we always enter the author's affiliations when we create new DOIs, but none are displayed in the member/prep display. Why is this? Good question. I think we might have to look into that specific case to find out. Depends what method you're using to register your metadata. Maybe there is something getting lost between the system you're using and ours. If you're using one of the helper tools, that would be concerning because we have control over how they function. Yeah, let us know what your member name or your prefix is and what tool you're using to register. If you find any gaps that you're not expecting, we will help you track down what's going wrong there. Like I said earlier, this is what participation reports is really great for, just to figure out if there's something going wrong. If you're sending that data to us, then it should be listed in participation reports. The only other thing I can think of is that you're not toggling the current content backfile all time drop down at the top right of the tool where you can, and you're looking at old records, for example, whereas in the new ones you would actually have included that metadata. Johan says updating metadata using the web deposit form doesn't work for publications with an ISBN. The system says I can't resubmit with an existing ISBN. Is there any way to update metadata without resubmitting the whole record? Kathleen, are you familiar with that error? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Do you want me to jump in here?
Yes, please.
Okay. It should allow you. I guess I'm confused about the system says that it can't submit with an existing ISBN. The only reason that it would prevent you from resubmitting is if you've changed the title. Then we have a really strict title lock in place. So if you have submitted a title attached to an ISBN and you have submitted it and then you realize there's a typo in the title or you need to change that and you try and change it, it will tell you it can't be done. And that's not something of the web deposit form, that's something in our system. So if you come across that problem, you would have to email support at Crossref and we would have to update the title record in our system for you. So that's perhaps one part of your question. The other part is that you say, is there a way to update without resubmitting the whole record? If you're doing a book, and you have multiple chapters or something, you don't have to include all of the chapters all over again. If there's just one chapter, say, that you need to update, or if there's just one, if you're just doing a book registration, you would have to enter everything into the web deposit form again. I guess the only instance is, like I said, if you have a book with a lot of chapters and you just have a typo in one chapter you need to correct, you would just have to resubmit that one chapter. You don't have to submit all of them again. So hopefully that somewhat answers your question. If you have more specifics or I did not answer it, you can please email support and we can help work through that with you.
Thanks, Kathleen. A couple questions in the chat. Nice, that's good to hear. A couple questions in the chat. One person asking what additional functionality we're intending to develop for this new tool. So what I already mentioned, what we're working on now is to allow you to go back to anything you previously registered with the tool and easily pre-fill the form again with the latest metadata for that record, so you can make changes to it without having to retype everything, which is obviously something that is quite commonly needed. We also want to build support for more work types into the tool. So there's lots of different things, like books, for example, that you currently have to use our web deposit form to register, and we'd like to offer a more modern alternative for that. conference content data, all these different content types we want to support. We also will add some more additional fields like relationships metadata, for example, or more detailed crossmark metadata. Yeah, we really want this to become kind of our one-stop shop for anyone who doesn't want to work with XML and who doesn't have an integration in the manuscript submission system, the helper tool that you can go to for all of your metadata needs. Reference styles, citation styles, as far as I know, we don't have a preference for. It's good if it's one of the kind of commonly used ones. I think we even have a list in our documentation somewhere of the ones that we definitely know will work. It helps if you have if you keep the numbering that is often at the beginning of each line in the bibliography. If you keep that in, it helps the system interpret something as a new reference. Maybe Kathleen has a link that she can send in response to that question. But sort of the most common citation styles, they're all accounted for. I don't think we would recommend using a specific one. Whatever is used in the paper should work. And I mean, the one thing that I will say is obviously if you have a DOI for the cited item, include that. That's wonderful. That definitely helps our system understand what is being cited, but we know that's not always possible. The web deposit form, yes, that will still work for a while. It's our reliable workhorse, which we will not be retiring before we've fully adequately replaced it. So don't worry, that will be a fallback available to you still for the next years, I think. An example of a crossmark deposit via the web deposit form. I don't know if there is maybe a useful screenshot of that at the link about, oh, so you don't mean bulk updates, you mean just how to submit crossmark metadata in the web deposit form in general. Yeah, I'll have to see if there is, if we already have an example of that, because I know it's not particularly straightforward if you're not that familiar with crossmark. We definitely have an explainer video that I think also includes it. We'll see if we can find a link and send it to you, Edison. We know you well, so that's not a problem. Good to hear, moving to a digital platform that will integrate, hopefully. Very good. Yes, presented as a numbered list, like I said, is always helpful for references. By through the web deposit form, Kathleen, I think you probably mean simple text query, right? So the web deposit form doesn't have, yes, doesn't have a built-in reference deposit feature, but we do have a separate tool that you can go to, there it is, to paste in a reference list, see if the system can successfully match it, and then get all the DOIs back that the system could find, and then deposit it with a parent record. Which is still something you can do even if you use this new tool that has the reference deposit built in. If you prefer to use it, we just know that a lot of people prefer to go to a single page to fill out and then be done. If you use the web deposit form and you finish an article submission, then it tells you at the end of the process, now go to simple text query and submit your references. There's a question about LaTeX being supported. I see Patrick is answering that now. I don't think that will be rendered correctly, but I'm very happy for Patrick to prove me wrong. So I think we were supposed to keep it to about 45 minutes, but I think we're happy to stay on for a few more minutes since there's more questions coming in. If you have to run, again, the recording will be shared once it's ready with anyone who signed up for the session. Very happy to see so many of you here and to have so many questions. It's great. I hope most of you have now managed to find their member and their participation report. I see that we were very busy helping some of you find the right one. If you're left with questions still after this, come find us, for example, in the community forum, and we'll be happy to keep up the conversation. I'll let Kathleen, no pressure, finish writing her last answer before closing the session if we don't have any more questions. Okay. I think that's all of the open questions answered. For anyone who was waiting for that final answer, since Zoom has now put it in a different tab, I'll read it out just for fun. Question was, what's the data type for supplementary materials such as software code, animations, videos, etc.? We are thinking about which new content types we should be adding to our schema in our future schema updates. As Kathleen says in her answer, we usually recommend data sets for these kinds of things, even if maybe they don't always 100%, you wouldn't necessarily call them data sets, but we can also always help you find the right match for a specific example. You can also add supplemental content attached to an existing DOI, so do let us know if you have a specific example. Yeah, little plug for our support team. They're fantastic. I'm not just saying that because Kathleen's here. If you need help, you'll be surprised how much they can help you. Okay, with that, I think we'll bring the session to a close. Thanks again for so many of you for attending and staying till the very end. I hope you found it useful, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.